Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. You're listening to The Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shave, the author. This week, after a short break, I am reading Chapter 5. It's finally time to meet the dreaded Dragon Emperor and begin the season. Now let's get started. Friday came faster than it should have. All the kids were excited to be let out of school, for we had 3 glorious days to ourselves. 3 glorious days of meadow play. I was worried, fidgeting at my desk before the bells rang. Tonight, the Dragon Emperor would present his prestigious and mysterious inner circle and declare the season officially open. We would enjoy months of long play up until the winter's cold scared us off. I had learned that each ruler was measured in season's length instead of years. A year was equivalent to a season, basically. I could not fathom who was waiting for me at Cloverleaf. I was on high alert. Crane likely told the Emperor of my crimes, my treasons. Were the Elite Four waiting? Was the Emperor himself waiting for me? What would they do to me? Would they execute me? Give me a restart? Madison had been right. Curiosity did kill the cat. Many of us figured we would go right to the meadow after school. It was not very far from where we were. As I walked outside the school's limits, I found Lucille searching the endless crowd. She was wearing a nice frilly pink top and some simple black leggings. Her hair was in pigtails, and she waved at once when she saw me. "Hello, my lord," she smiled. "Are you going right to Everglade?" I nodded, uneasy. "Yes, I am. Are you?" She dipped her head as well. "I shall walk with you." "Wait up!" a voice called from behind. It was Eva. Boy, was I glad to see her. With these 2 girls at my side, I could face whatever was waiting. Let's all go together. I sighed and decided to tell them what had happened. I told them about my visit with the Royal Highnesses and the exchange. I also explained the odd behavior of Crane. "Do not be afraid," Eva told me as we walked. "You have nothing to fear." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, alarmed. "I am a new lord in this game, and I have been asking too many questions. They know I am seeking answers. I was also in a foreign country when I really shouldn't have been." "You are only understanding what Violet interpreted," Eva said simply. "She merely said that Crane is aware of what you are doing. That could be false, you know. He could have simply just said that you were interesting because you chose to hang around Gaia." I stopped, contemplating what she had said. She was right. I was interpreting what Violet had understood from Crane's words. It all made sense. But then again, it might be what I was thinking. I could not seriously disconnect from my feelings that I was going to be jailed or executed. How could my visit to Gaia go unpunished? "We won't know till we get there," Lucille said, a couple of feet ahead. She was happy today. "Yes, let's go," I remarked. "We shall keep our wits about us anyway." Once we arrived, Cloverleaf was deserted. We had come from the other way, so we did not have to cross the entire meadow to reach my lordship. The path we took snaked its way through a residential area and was an asphalt path backing onto people's backyards. All we saw were yards and tall fences. Perhaps it was best that we came this way as to avoid confrontation with Imperial guards patrolling the Bermuda Bridge. We were there less than half an hour, scoping out the place, when a soldier crossed the bridge. Dressed in Roman-style plastic armor and wearing a spiked cap, the boy came to us with a letter. A long black cape fell from his shoulders. "I am seeking the Lord of Cloverleaf," he said attentively. "That is me," I remarked, stepping forward. He handed me the letter and bowed. It was a rolled scroll tied with a red ribbon. "This is a formal invitation to the season opening this evening. As you are a member of the aristocracy, you are required to attend." "Thank you," I said simply. The boy nodded and turned away. He marched across the bridge. I opened the scroll and read it quickly. It had been typed and printed on paper that looked suspiciously like the printer paper from the school library. That paper was yellowish, unfortunately. There was an impressive letterhead and clip art of a dragon. At the very bottom, the Exalted One had signed his name in ink. "How formal," Eva observed. "Indeed," I replied, folding up the letter. "The Emperor means business." The scroll itself had said what the soldier boy told me. It was a formal invite to the party this evening. There were no special instructions or anything of that nature. I, however, did not know what to expect from these sort of things. "Will there be food or drink?" I asked. "Music, perhaps?" Lucille giggled. "No, nothing like that. There might be drinks, but no food or music." "It is customary to offer drinks," Eva told me. But otherwise the Emperor will just unveil his plans for the season and we will all get to view the aristocracy and the army. So I will finally get to meet them all, I murmured, interested. You pretty much have. The only one you haven't met is Lady Sakura. There is no one else? You must be kidding, I gasped. Cameron, myself, Isaac, Tetsuo, and Sakura? That is all? Really? Eva, Lucille growled playfully. You are forgetting Commandant Alexei. Oh, that's right, the scholar laughed. Alexei is the head of the army, but that's not his real name. I think he borrowed it from a video game or something. Anyone else? I asked. That's all of them, Lucille said, her hands clasped behind her back. Aside from the Elite Four, of course. Well, sure are a lot of boys with titles, I mumbled. Why is that? Do you know? There are no ladies in his court. The only other I can think of is Tigress. Rumor has it that the Dragon Emperor is faint of heart for girls, Lucille giggled, blushing slightly. That is why he keeps Lady Sakura wrapped up in his castle, so that he might admire her, Eva added. I mean, come on, you've heard the tales about him and Princess Violet. I nodded. That made certainly too much sense. This Dragon Emperor would be distracted by too many girls at his castle or in his retinue, and be unbalanced from his tasks. It made me laugh, and it was also quite foolish. He might as well just find a consort then, I added. He wanted Violet, but Violet is with Oberon, Eva explained. Sakura is inferior now, and he hasn't found a girl he really likes yet. I mean, yeah, he's distracted by all of us, but when it comes down to it, he needs a consort that his court will approve of. Violet has royal blood. She is a princess in her own right. She came to us as a princess and then aligned with the rebellion, Lucille remarked. But isn't this Lady Sakura the self-proclaimed Queen of Rivers? Doesn't that make her royal enough? I mean, she is a queen. She is the only one who recognizes that title. No one else does, Eva said sadly. I see, I said, rubbing my chin in thought. Oh, the drama. Both the girls laughed, and then I laughed too. What time is the unveiling? Eva asked. 7, I remarked. We must get home and freshen up. I shall meet you all back here around then. If any of you see Victor, make sure his armor is shiny and ready to go. The sun had not quite set when we all arrived at Cloverleaf. It was a crisp evening on the cusp of summer, but with a chill in the air. I had decided to wear something semi-casual and somewhat formal. With my black-framed glasses, I wore a simple green and white plaid shirt with basic dark denim. The lights were aglow, lining the path, and the streetlight in Cloverleaf had also come on prematurely. I chose to do nothing with my dull hair, instead letting it rest over my eyes. Lucille had arrived around the same time as me. She had changed into a yellow floral summer dress, and her hair was strung down. Victor came next, astutely dressed in his handsome plastic armor with a saber in his scabbard and his hair combed. Eva was the last to arrive. She hardly wore dresses, but the ankle-length blue and black dress suited her well. Don't we all look fancy? She giggled, approaching our little group. We must make a good impression on the exalted one, I said half-jokingly. We want to make him believe Cloverleaf is not destitute anymore. But we aren't, are we? Victor pondered. I laughed. No, we are quite well off now. Are we ready to go, my lord? My royal attendant asked. I nodded, and Victor led the group across the bridge. The royal city was filled with children of all ages. There were loud buzzes of chatter. The lights lining the city were bright, and servants were handing out iced tea in Dixie cups. There were guards everywhere as well, dressed in samurai armor. A few were wearing conical hats. The others wore curious kabuto, or samurai headgear. It appeared they had all forgotten their Roman-esque breastplates and opted for the Empire's Asian look. We all immediately began to mingle with our own. My own troop staying close. Victor was my private guard, but Eva slipped away to speak with her master, the Lord Cameron. I found Madison in no time. She was dressed elegantly in a sweeping red strapless, her hair flowing and draped along her back. So nice to see you, my lord, she said with a smile. She was surrounded by a large entourage befitting a duchess, including Nova. A pleasure, your grace, I bowed deeply. Such a large turnout, she observed, sipping her iced tea. I see the new ambassador, Annie Tremblay, is fitting in nicely. I am glad to see the diplomatic relations between our empire and Gaia have resumed. Has the emperor chosen an ambassador to exchange with Gaia? I asked. Yes, but I am unsure of who he is, the duchess replied aimlessly. I do not care to know his name. He will be another pawn in the Emperor's ruthless game of chess." "A large turnout indeed," I said, looking over at Annie. She was gathered with a few others, laughing. "Have you noticed if Oberon and Violet are here yet? I had heard that they were coming." "I have not noticed their Royal Highnesses yet," the Duchess replied. "I am sure they will turn up with quite a reputable retinue, I might add." No sooner had we discussed the Gaia Royals did they come sweeping in from the forest. Like the Duchess had predicted, they brought an impressive entourage. The guards of the forest were different than the samurai of the city. Gaia guards wore curious plastic armor, much like my very own Victor. They wore capes of burlap brown and green kerchiefs. There were at least 8 of them, carrying plastic obsidian spears. Each one looked the same as the last. The only thing that might set them apart were their height. Princess Violet strolled royally along with Oberon, hand in hand. They both looked positively radiant. The entire crowd had stopped to observe their arrival with intrigue. It was almost as if their visit had stopped time. Violet had her hair down in waves like the day I had first seen her in the forest. She was wearing a flowing blue gown that touched the grass, and her slender figure was visible. Oberon himself looked equally as elegant, wearing a blue dress shirt fitted with a black tie and blazer. Atop their heads they wore woven branch and twig crowns to denote their status as leaders of the forest. "Such opulence," the Duchess observed, finishing her tea. She extended her hand, and Nova filled the cup again. "They look absolutely luminous." The 2 royals had noticed our intent gazes. Their entourage swept towards us like a wave in a pool. Once they had come closer, I noticed that the princess was wearing red lipstick, blush, eyeliner, and mascara. She was truly breathtaking. "Your Royal Highnesses," the Duchess remarked, bowing from the head. I gave them a sweeping and overly dramatic bow. "Such a great crowd tonight," the princess remarked, looking around. "We were just discussing that," I said. "Such a pleasure to see you both here." "We wouldn't miss it for the world," Oberon said, smiling at me. His eyes twinkled hypnotically. I gestured for Lucille to bring them some iced tea, but their own attendants were already on it. "Only one guard, Lord Theo?" the princess inquired, looking over at Victor. My loyal friend was already bored, I could tell. He had found Garth, and the 2 were talking. "That is all I can afford, Your Highness," I replied. "That is all I need, anyway." "Well, you certainly look handsome tonight," she said. I smiled, and I could feel myself blushing slightly. "As do you, Princess. You look as elegant as a swan. I am sure the Emperor will be quite taken with you." "He cannot have her," Oberon said proudly, then laughed. "She is mine." There was a moment of silence between us, but a small boy had approached Madison, and she bent down to listen to what he had to say. "You must excuse us, Majesties," the Duchess said suddenly. "We are required at the bottom of the hill for the descending of the Emperor ceremony." "Ah, yes, the assembly of the aristocracy," Oberon observed. "This will be fun for you, Theo." "We shall see you later, then," Madison said, grabbing my hand. The Emperor sat on a wicker throne that had no age. Formerly, during this time, it was known as the Dragon Throne. It was truly the only thing that had outlived any reign in the meadow. The chair had been brought down from his perch, and he would soon sit on it for the duration of the evening. Madison had told me that the throne was one of the most enduring objects in the entire kingdom. It was older than most of them, and had always been the throne for the rulers of Everglade. It had since become a symbol of unity, and of the crown as a whole. Right now the chair sat empty. There were guards all around it. Beside the seat, members of the high aristocracy had begun to gather. I noticed Lord Cameron and Lord Isaac conversing, dressed in their thick, fleecy robes. Tetsuo and who I presumed was his sister were talking too, but they were not speaking English. We approached them. "Good evening, Miyamoto's siblings," the Duchess said. They bowed before her. "Have you had the pleasure of meeting Lord Theo?" "I have," Tetsuo said, shaking my hand. Lady Sakura said nothing. Instead, she observed me closely. She was comely, to say the least, and like her brother, was Japanese. She had long, silky, straight black hair and was dressed in a beautiful red and gold silk kimono that draped the grass. It was etched with an enticing design of orange koi swimming upstream. "I am Lady Sakura, the Queen of Rivers," she said at last. "It is nice to finally meet you, Lord Theo. I have heard so little about you, but then again, no one tells me anything." "The pleasure is all mine, your grace," I said, bowing before her. I lowered my voice into a whisper and leaned in close to her ear. "I might get into trouble for saying this, but I recognize your royal title, Your Majesty." I could feel myself smiling. Sakura beamed as I leaned away. "Thank you, my lord. You have a powerful ally in me." Smiling, I took my place beside Tetsuo, who was in turn beside his sister. On the opposite side of me was Isaac, who was more inclined to speak with Cameron than myself. Madison, being the kingdom's sole duchess, assumed her rightful place next to the throne. I looked around the amassing children, wondering where the Elite Four were. They were probably with the Emperor, waiting for him to descend from his perch and begin this elaborate ceremony to sit himself on his wicker throne. We stood like dolls on display, passively staring into the crowd and standing sharply. I had been waiting for this moment for the last month. I was finally going to get a glimpse of the Dragon Emperor. I had imagined his appearance 1,000 times, and they were all the same vision. Towering and intrepid, with 2 swords, dressed like a shogun of Japan. He wore thick samurai armor, his face concealed. An impressive kabuto lined with gold and precious metals sat on his regal head. Now I only had to wait to see if my vision was accurate. "How often do you converse with the Emperor about city stuff?" I asked Tetsuo randomly. He seemed surprised by the question. "Hardly often, my lord. I go through my old chap, Lord Isaac, really. He is the Emperor's liaison when it comes to civil business. Occasionally I speak with the Commandant." "I have not seen nor met this Commandant yet," I remarked. "I am unsure what a Commandant really is. Which one is he?" "He is out sick, unfortunately," Tetsuo replied. "Poor fellow has the flu real bad. He is the head of the military." I nodded and turned my view to Lady Sakura. "How often do you see the Emperor?" I asked. "Every day," she sighed. "We have run out of things to talk about, he and I. I am trapped." "Interesting," I replied. "You see him more often than me, for I have not met him yet." "You'll be surprised," she said frankly, almost dully. I could tell she was unimpressed. Someone blew a plastic trumpet, and I was caught off guard. Turning slightly, I noticed a few older teens blowing into plastic horns. I assumed that meant that the Emperor was ready to come down and spectate. One of the Elite Four had appeared suddenly next to the throne. It was Tigress, the only female samurai master, and the only one I had not met formally. I could not see her face, for her head was covered by a kabuto helmet, blood-red in color and matching her red armor. Her blonde hair was enveloped in a long braid that fell down her back. She held up her hand for silence amongst the gathered crowd. "It is with great delight that I announce the arrival of our exalted one, protector of Everglade, the Dragon Emperor." Light drumming came out of nowhere, accompanied by the horns. The descending of the Emperor's ceremony was beginning. A large line of samurai came marching down the hill, katana hoisted into the air in unison. The boys looked like clones, one after the other. Behind them came girls dressed in kimono, waving red and gold pennons. This was quite the royal show. Next came the Elite Four, save Tigress, who was already at the bottom of the hill. They assumed their 4 cardinal positions by the throne, one on each corner, with Tigress and Crane in front and Fox and Mantis behind the chair. 2 coy kimono girls with long draping pennons stood in front of them, and Madison was forced to shuffle down. Finally, the moment of truth. The Dragon Emperor descended the hill, and like Sakura had said, I was surprised. He was not tall, but he was not short either. His armor was red and gold, and like in my visions, he wore a regal kabuto helmet, and his face was veiled. You could only see his shimmering blue eyes. He walked like a child, however, with no nobility in his step. He swayed his arms as he sauntered towards the throne, and the children before us edged into a deep bow. Many were forced onto one knee and bowed from the stomach. All you could see was a wave of dipped heads and backs. There was almost a fear that if you did not bow deep enough, the Exalted One would interrupt his step to reach out and strangle you. Once he was seated, his Elite Four did some sort of ninja hand and fist clasp and stepped back. "My people," the Emperor said. They rose in unison. I was startled by the childlike voice our Emperor possessed. I was certainly expecting a deep baritone. I was expecting the Dragon Emperor to be a battle-hardened teenager, ripped from gym class. This kid seemed no more than, well, a kid. How could he have rallied all these children to his side? How could he command such an army, such a following? We were made to believe he was unstoppable, unbeatable, and truly an immortal deity. I was disappointed, but was also intrigued. No wonder he barely showed his face. The Dragon Emperor wishes to thank all of his citizens for attending, Mantis said, stepping forward. The Exalted One has a few words that he would like to share with all his beloved citizens. Tigress added, Listen carefully. Both the Princess Violet and the Prince Oberyn stood forward, stepping to the opposite side of the throne. This is a new era for our meadow, the Emperor said, not rising. Diplomatic relations with our forest-dwelling friends have resumed, and I would like to extend my hand of peace towards them. I could not help but notice how short the Emperor was compared to Princess Violet. She was a king standing next to a cat. The idea made me giggle, but I had to refrain myself. We are going to do great things this summer, my citizens, he carried on. His tone remained monotonous. We are going to be focusing on the reworking of our key industries, as they were depleted under the outgoing king who shall remain nameless. Only under my regime will we prosper. There were a few bits of clapping from the crowd, but once the Elite Four began clapping, everyone was forced to. The Emperor smiled, and that was all he said. The Exalted One wishes for the season to be opened, Tigress remarked rather coldly. Please enjoy the complimentary drinks. Also, before we are all dismissed to converse and mingle, your members of nobility will be introduced. Lord Isaac, our chief administrator, Tigress continued. Cameron, benefactor and lord of the observatory, Fox remarked. Lady Sakura, Crane coughed. Tetsuo, lord of the royal city, Mantis said aloud. And then it came to me. Theo, lord of Cloverleaf. Crane was the one to say my name. He said it almost as if his mouth was full of poison. I could hear the distaste in his mouth. And finally, Madison, the Duchess of Sunset, Tigress said with gusto. On the right to the throne we have their Royal Highnesses Prince Oberyn and Princess Violet of Gaia, Fox remarked loudly. Unfortunately, Commandant Alexei could not be with us tonight. He is very sick with the flu. Now you may all mingle and converse. The season is open, Tigress called happily. Her tone had changed rapidly over the course of the introductions. There was much talk that evening, mostly about commerce and the military. A great deal of lower gentry was interested in the yields of Sunset, and a few were quite inquisitive about Cloverleaf. The royals were off limits during the mingling. They were speaking almost exclusively with the Emperor and the Elite Four. Even us lords and ladies were excluded from approaching the Dragon Throne. You seem to be settling in well, Lord Tetsuo was saying to me candidly. I nodded. Yes, the game is growing on me. How wonderful, Cameron added. We were all gathered in a semicircle, sipping at our drinks. Cloverleaf is certainly making a comeback, I remarked. I hope to attract more settlers in the coming months. I feel that is what I lack, more people to lord over. Cameron laughed. I certainly wish I had the territory. My lordship is the deed to the observatory, that's all. I have no lands. The royal city is a constant challenge for me, Tetsuo said, crushing his Dixie cup. Why, just the other day, Commandant Alexei told me that the military is expanding its ministry. Now why would they need to do that? Lord Cameron pondered. We are not at war. I am intrigued to know as well, I added curiously. The Commandant does not tell me these things, Tetsuo growled. To him, I am a petty lord. Why, that foolish, half-robotic boy can just buzz off. Did you say half-robotic? My ears were buzzing. Lord Cameron blinked obliviously. Yes, of course. How could you not know? I have never met the Commandant. There was abrupt silence, and Lady Sakura joined our little group. Did I hear Alexei's name on the wind? The lady asked with intrigue. Yes, her brother answered. Apparently Lord Theo here hasn't met him yet. Ah, then you certainly do not know, she giggled. Do tell, I gestured. Commandant Alexei was involved in a serious military training accident last spring, the same year he joined the meadow. He's so dark, that Alexei, Lady Sakura explained. He was gravely injured, and the only course of action to save him was make him more robot than man. It was truly a display of how far we have come with technology. How is this possible? I asked. He wears a mask, Cameron replied frankly, almost like a kerchief, but it's designed to look like robotic parts. I think he got it at the dollar store or something. Makes him look like Darth Vader." "Yes," Tetsuo said. The black robotic cloth covers his nose and mouth, but his angry eyes are still visible. The mask muffles his voice, so he even sounds like a cyborg. "His voice gives me the chills," Cameron shivered. I nodded, deeply fascinated. Just when I thought this game couldn't get any more interesting, there was a military leader who was more cyborg than boy. This commandant must have a wild imagination. "What is he like?" I asked finally. "Well, he's all right, I suppose," Tetsuo said. "He gets things done." "Is he as stone cold as the Elite Four?" "A little," Sakura replied. "But he is somewhat sympathetic. One might call him mysterious. Not many people know about him. He is a friend of the Emperor, though." "He is often unmissable," Cameron added. "He wears a black cape. How enduring." "So, his regalia is unlike all of this East Asian-inspired samurai stuff?" They all nodded at once. "More sci-fi," Tetsuo said. "He's quite cool," Cameron remarked. I nodded. "He sounds cool." As the sun began to set even further and the darkness arrived, more and more children began to split from the group and leave. This was a huge gathering, the largest I had witnessed yet in the meadow. It was a good time to mingle and get to know your neighbors and figure out what was going on and who was doing what. I admit, it was also nice to have actually viewed the Emperor with my own eyes, even if he wasn't what I was expecting. Lucille and Eva both found me and told me that Garth and Victor had gone home. "Did you two ladies have fun?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Yes, thank you, my lord," Eva replied. "I hope you did." I nodded deeply. "Yes, I did. It was nice to talk with everyone, especially the lords." "Well, I must be going," Lucille said suddenly, glancing at her watch. "I'll see you guys tomorrow." "Have a good night," I said happily. That just left Eva and me alone. "Do you know much about Commandant Alexei? He seems like an important lad, but no one has mentioned his disabilities till now." "His disabilities, my lord?" Eva was confused. "Do you mean his robot-like appearance?" I nodded grimly. I could not think of the word. Eva rubbed her chin delicately. "I guess none of us have mentioned him very much, huh? Sorry, my lord, he's been out sick. I almost forgot entirely about him." "What is his real name? Do you know?" "Zach Beverly," she answered. The name struck a chord with me. I went to school with a Beverly. This Zach fellow was in my class. "Something wrong, my lord?" "I go to school with him," I said. "He's in my grade." "Oh, then you know him well enough," she said with a smile. "I see him occasionally at school, too." I knew him just a tad, really. He was a weird kid. He kept to himself, but he was often muttering about Pokemon and playing card games. He did not seem the type to lead the military of an entire empire. He just seemed too out of place and too nerdy. "I am just a little taken aback, Eva," I said at last. She was giving me a weird look. "The Zach Beverly I know is a nerdy kid who loves Pokemon and keeps to himself." "Yeah, that's him," she laughed. "He battles us and beats us all, too." "How is he half bionic and leading an army?" I asked loudly. I could not believe what I was hearing. After all this time, Commandant Alexei was really just a boy in my class, a timid, inexperienced, and quiet, nerdy kid. The way they spoke of him, he could almost shatter glass with a glare. "He is two sides to the same coin, I guess," she said. "He seems like a totally different person when he's here in the meadow than when he is at school. He's really friendly, but he means business. He is enduring and powerful, but also clever and smart." "I see," I replied, calming down. "His creativity was unleashed in the meadow. I should have to seek this Commandant Alexei out when he returned to the meadow. I should like to make him my ally, like I made Cameron and Sakura my allies." "He will likely be here tomorrow, if not Sunday," Eva added. "I simply cannot wait," I said, staring at the darkened grass. It was likely past 9 now, and we were entirely alone in the meadow, save a few others in the distance. The lights from the path illuminated a small area, but it was becoming dark. "I should probably be going," Eva remarked, shivering. "I'll see you tomorrow." I nodded, and she skipped away down the asphalt path. I continued to stare at the ground. Nothing was as it seemed in this meadow. Everyone was someone different. This was truly a realm of pure imagination, and anyone could be anything. An above-average child ruled this place with an iron fist and called himself an emperor. A quiet, intellectual gamer was a powerful military ruler. I could not help but laugh to myself. I suppose I should start imagining an identity for myself, much like my famed cousin once did. After all, we were just curious children playing an imaginary game. That concludes Chapter 5, the season opener. That was a long one. Hopefully you hung on. Join me next week when I read Chapter 6, The Dragon's Storm. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter long weekend and continue to enjoy your week. See you next time. Dragon Boats by Fass is the music used during this novel on the podcast. Find us online on Facebook and Instagram by searching at Everglade Chronicles. You can find all 3 of the Everglade Chronicles novels exclusively on Amazon. Thank you kindly for your support.